And so we are all here. And on behalf of the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute, this is a teaching in plasma science. We are at the intermediate insight level. The subject today is sunshine. My name is Alexander, and I am from Canada, and it is April 17th, 2022. This is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. As I mentioned, we are talking about an intermediate insight, and as such, we've tried to organize the classes because in our archives, we have thousands of hours of teaching and going back, well, more than a decade. And so it becomes quite a mountain to climb if someone is a new knowledge seeker. So we try to organize things in basic, intermediate, and advanced classes, starting with basic teaching. And we went to intermediate teaching, and then intermediate understanding, intermediate knowing, and we are now at the intermediate insight level. And the reason for that is because it allows us to progress. So it gives a path for the new students to see exactly where they are on the map of the road to knowledge, and for the mature students, how to navigate this road of knowledge, and also for giving a pattern and a path for new teachers. So as you can see, we're near this end of this session here. Last week we talked about moonshine, and we know that moonshine is a very important part of our lives. But we are trying to go into uncharted skies. And what we need to do is to understand that there are leaders and there are followers. And so the followers need to be very, very careful with respect to who they follow. We don't always have the right guides, and we don't always have the right answers. But there are answers, and those answers rest within our moral leadership. And in order to be moral, we need to be sober. And so why do we not want to be sober? And it has to do with morality. Why do we get drunk? Why do we get stoned? And why do we get high? To try and forget. And so we have very important days, and as this is an important day in the calendar, we all become students. And we have things that we can hear, and we have things that we can see, but they don't reflect necessarily the right choices, because we all make a default choice. And that default choice is manifest in the fact that we were born. And when you look at when you were born and can we get elevated, we need to sort things out. And frankly, there's a very rough road ahead, and it's going to get rougher. So we need to really adjust our compass, because we have to tune into the universe and turn on to the energy transactions that come as a result of that. And in order to be able to benefit from that, we have to drop out of our physical limitations. And so we've come to a real pressure point. And this pressure point is the opportunity for us to leave our nest. And as we try and get our bearings, and we see that we have problems, and last week we had some fuel problems. We have corrected them. We have improved the quality of our fuel system. But we are launching to the moon on June the 6th or sooner. And so there's a lot of pressure because it's T minus 49 days and counting. And in simple math, it's less than 7 weeks. So the pressure is absolutely mounting. And so today's an important date, and June the 6th is an important date, but we have another pressure, and that's there's a date in between. It's the May 2-4 weekend. So this weekend is one step closer. And as you get one step closer, and then it increases the pressure. And so this is a very important day in Canada. But to alleviate that, as I said many times, May 2-4 weekend in Canada is every weekend. And any excuse will do to have a party, right? Because in that process, we can forget our morality and forget our sins and not even worry about whether they are sins. We don't care. Just want to have fun. We just want to party. And we just continue to delay the consequences of our immoral actions. And so as this pressure grows, it doesn't go away really, it just adds to the pressure. And so we were playing musical chairs a while back, and one of the things about that is that we reduced the number of players, and as we reduced the number of chairs. But in the world of reality, you can't reduce the number of players. You can only transform the players. So in other words, the players remain, always. They just work in different fields. And so if we change the game of musical chairs, so we don't reduce the number of players, we reduce the number of chairs, so we reduce the field strength. But we bring more players. And so we increase the pressure. And so to alleviate that pressure, we have to go down gravitationally. And as more players come, we have less chairs. So to compensate, we have to go deeper, more in. And then we come to a point where there's nowhere to go. So as it keeps coming, the pressure increases, and you get to the point of overcrowding. And so something has to give. You can't drown your sorrows in things that give you an artificial reality, because your perception of that reality may change. And one of the things that inebriation does is that allows you to do the unallowable. But we have to remain sober so that we understand the other realities. The other realities has to do with when two forces come together, they create a field, which we call the X, Y, and Z axis. And so this is the universal harvesting we call self-enhancement. And life is hard enough. So do we have to work so hard at self-consumption? Do we have to work so hard at diminishing our capabilities by being drunk, stoned, or high? Or do we have to be self-consumed by stealing from others and going so far as to even steal their life source, the lelouch harvesting? Is this what we have to do? And do we become party to that? because these are all points of conflict. And so conflicts generally are thought of as military conflicts, but there are other conflicts that are actually more imposing. There are conflicts of interest. There are conflicts between inventors and investors and shareholders. And as such, we are shareholders. And the conflict resolution sometimes comes together in a flash, because the energy has to go somewhere, right? You can maintain the energy in a rotating field, but as that energy grows, if that field remains constant, and if the pressure increases, then where do you go? So if you have no chair to sit on, then basically you just kind of get ejected, and that becomes a flash. But so what we need to do is to understand the difference between a flash and a glow. So when you see this energy coming out, and you ask yourself, is it a flash, which is kind of temporary, or is it a glow, which is enduring? And then at that point, you understand the difference between light and sunlight. Because actually, what we're not seeing is what we call the vanishing point. And this is what we've been talking about for the past few weeks, because we found that when we make GANs, the GANs is a product of our susceptibility. The GANs is a physical product of our existence. But within that existence, we develop the whole. And there's nothing in that whole. So the GANs has vanished. But maybe it's just transparent. And although we don't see anything, what we are seeing is the soul in the whole. Because the soul is transparent. And this is what we have to understand. If the soul is transparent, then the universal community can see your soul. Because to us, the universal community is transparent. Because we can't see them. So in some ways, this puts us to a disadvantage, because we can't lie, cheat, and steal and be devious and, be dominating. You can't play poker when everybody knows your cards. And so it's astounding when you continue to play poker and everybody knows what you're holding. It's just incredible. So we've come to the point of understanding what this vanishing point is. It is a convergence of the verification point, which is coming to, and is what we transmit. And it's a validation point of where we've come from, which is part of our transition. And so where these 2 points meet, this is our point of existence. So we say this point of existence is the point of transmutation. And there's a balance between these fields. Clearly, this balance point is invisible. So the transmutation is the crossover point of the vanishing point. And this crossover point is crossing over the limitations of our soul, which is operating in fields of a plasmatic reality and in fields of a physical reality. And so we know this because we have confirmation. We have a confirmation of what we can see, and we have a confirmation of what we can't see. And so to limit our abilities, we have man-made laws. And so what these man-made laws is interpret the universal laws on our behalf. And so this is an imposition on our soul capabilities. And one has to ask the question, why do we impose these limitations? Because in reality, the fun is in the unlimitations, isn't it? So what's our problem? And how does it come together? And what I'm harping on is the fact that a somatoscope is illegal. A somatoscope is illegal. There are many technical, physical things that are illegal. And if these technical, physical things were created physically or invented physically, these are a byproduct of nature. Why is a byproduct of nature illegal? So if you answer that question, you understand what's wrong with this earth, with life on this earth. And it's because of that, you understand why the universal community is reluctant to participate. Because really, who wants to participate with hooligans? Actually, even hooligans don't want to participate with hooligans. So, that creates a real dilemma. But Gaston Nason's introduced a somatoscope, which is able to see tiny bodies. So on the screen here, you have big bodies, large circles, and you have tiny dots. And what I want you to notice is the size relationship between the tiny dots and the large circles. So the large circles is the blood, and the small circles are the somatids. And somatids are tiny bodies. And these are about the tiniest bodies that we know of, or that we've been able to see physically. And so this microscope has a capability, and because we're more advanced in our learning, we understand what a nanometer is. It's 10 to the minus ninth of a meter. That's 9 orders of magnitude smaller than a meter. And of course, an angstrom, 10 angstroms equals 1 nanometer. So an angstrom is 8 orders of magnitude smaller than a meter. And this magnification is at 150 angstroms. So this would be 7 orders of magnitude less than a meter. In another relationship, this is 30,000 times the magnification capability of your eye. When you compare that to the 1,200 times magnification of a microscope. Why is this thing illegal? And what are we looking at? So this is what we want to discuss, what we're looking at. So fundamentally, when we see a relationship between an electron and a proton, we know that an electron is 1,849 times smaller than a proton. 1,849 times, not 30,000 times, only 1,849 times. So the electron-proton relationship is very, very similar to that of a blood molecule and that of a somatid. And so when we look at the fundamental principle of the twinity, to maintain this, there has to be a rotating field. And so the speed of the rotation of the plasma of the electron is dictated by the amount of the magnetic fields which are transferred from the large twin plasma of the proton to the plasma of the smaller twin plasma of the electron. If we substitute the proton for the blood and we substitute the electron for somatid, I think we'll explain what exactly is going on. Because you see, in order to maintain the fields, we said we had to start with a transmission along the x-axis, which is rotation. And you marry that with the transition through the y-axis, which we call polarity. And as the two come together, you create a crossover point. These are perpendicular crossover points, which we call the perpendicular vanishing point. But you see, there's always a bit left over when we go into different dimensions, and we've introduced pi as the factor there because roughly 3 times the diameter is equal to the perimeter of the circle. And so you say, okay, well, but there's a little bit that's left over. So somehow, some way, we need to practice our target shooting because beyond our physicality, we have emotions. And so today we're going to talk about co-creation. And then we have soul dimensions, which is a different geometry of the same geometry. The same geometry that the emotions go through. And the same geometry that our physicality goes through, you see, because when we go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, we change this relationship. In 2 dimensions, we have a perimeter to area relationship. In 3 dimensions, we have a surface of the sphere relationship to the volume of the sphere. And pi is involved in all of these things, and we don't know exactly what that number is, so we have to fudge things. And since we're none of these 3 dimensions, being the observer, you can't be an observer and be part of that dimension. So we are in a different dimension. We are the observer in the 4th dimension. So in order for it to fit our tiny perfect world, we have to fudge things, which makes us the observer fudger. And so we want to understand how energy flows, and we see that we can change the gradient charge, or we can change the charge gradient. And in this process, we create a field strength, which we call the z-axis. It's representative of the transmutation of this energy. And so we find that at the core of this field is the plasma. And this core wants to position itself versus other plasmas. We didn't say how many other plasmas. And we're not saying where these plasmas are. what we're saying is that the core plasma position can interact with other core plasma positions. And in that process, create a dynamism, which is a dynamic plasma of interaction. And all of this, of course, is based on the susceptibility of the relationship references. And we find that because energy is always in motion, that we can develop a synergy as a result of understanding this. And this synergy has different energy levels, and we can transcend these various levels. And the thing is that we can transcend these levels within the ranges just here on Earth, between our Earth and our magnetosphere. Just within that range, we can see that there are things that we can see, and we can see that there are things that we cannot see. But now what we can see is that there are things that we are not allowed to see. Well, who wrote that law? Is that universal law or is that man-made law? So when we look at the law of the universe, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. That's the rule. So if that's the case, then how does the stronger get fed? Because the stronger seems to have this insatiable desire to control everything. Or is the so-called stronger only stronger in the physicality and is basically just exercising the feeling of inferiority? In which case that feeling is stronger. How ironic. So we can go through life never understanding how the universe is created. And it's really unfortunate that there's so many men in the military, and how they get into the military is because they're very young. And so they don't know how the universe is created, and they don't question how the universe is created. And if they do question it, they don't necessarily get the answer. Like we were fortunate enough in book number 1 on the universal order of creation of matters to understand how the universe is created. So fundamentally, the universe is created from energy. And energy has a charge, and energy is always in motion. But last week we found out that whether the sun is shining or not, we are having energy. And this week, it's a given, isn't it? We all know that the sun gives us energy. So where does this energy come from? And since the sun is part of the universe, then the universe is greater than the part. I think everybody understands that. So when we have two parts that are equal and they come together from different points of view, direction, whatever, there may be a conflict. And so when we look at this point of conflict, not only is there a conflict with respect to direction of transition, but when we look at the rotating fields at that point of conflict, there's also a conflict of transmission. So we could have a conflict in transmission and transition. So what does that do to transmutation? Let's go back to these somatids, these tiny bodies. How observant are you? Can you see what you can't see? That's a stupid question. So this big thing in the middle that's not so tiny and it's bright, that's what we call a macrophage. And it could be anything, but why do we call it a macrophage? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you compare it to the size of a somatid, it's pretty macro. But if you were to compare it to something that you didn't see with a microscope, it would be a microphage. Isn't that interesting? So in the microscopic world, we have micros and macros. So the macros are not so tiny. Now, when we look at the blood cell, we see that there is a ring around the blood cell. And so that's what we see. We see that ring. We see that light. And when we look at the tiny dots, those are the somatids. And we can see them because they're a tiny light. So anyone who's followed the story of Gaston Nasons knows that he has filmed the emergence of the tiny light from the large light. So the somatid manifests itself physically from the blood cell. But when you look inside the blood cell, isn't it interesting? There's nothing there. I don't see anything there. And not only that, but where we have one blood cell overlapping another blood cell, I can see right through it. I can see the other cell. So not only is there nothing there, but it's transparent. But we know that nothing is nothing. Something is always something. Because that ring of light formed around what we see as nothing. So that ring of light formed around something. What is bacteria? Well, a bacteria is at least an order of magnitude larger than a somatid. Well, we know that a red blood cell is much larger than a somatid. And we also know that there are white blood cells. And so in this picture, you see red blood cells and white blood cells. I think the difference is obvious. The white blood cells are kind of white. But there is a funny shape in the center of the picture, and that is a bacteria. And the reason it's a funny shape is because it's a rod. And what makes this rod so funny? This rod transformed into a round bacteria by itself. It did that on its own. It did that with a kind of intelligence. This bacteria had an intelligence to transform from a rod to a round bacteria. And if you're not astounded with that, try this on for size. this bacteria transformed into a star formation. And this star formation did not separate, but you can clearly see the triangle formation. Pretty intelligent. Now you know the difference between intelligence and artificial intelligence. So we call this pleomorphism. And so the question then becomes, what is the relationship between the red blood cell, the white blood cell, the somatid, and the bacteria? And so this is only just an intermediate insight class. We have to avoid answering that question. But the ultimate question, why did this happen? Remember, why is not the question. Why is the answer. So you cannot fudge that. So if we understand plasma science is basically the magnetical attraction and repulsion of field forces. And you can explain this, that it's part of natural decay and natural creation. And so we know that there's an emission of energy and an absorption of energy. We call the emission magnetical. We call the absorption gravitational. But it has to emit and absorb from a point. And that point is a balanced position of magnetical gravitational energies. And so the emission is magnetical plus the maggrav, and the absorption is gravitational plus the maggrav. And these both work at the same time. It's a two-way street. So when we look at the basic model of nuclear decay, we're only looking at the one-way street. And so if we say that the neutron, through a decaying process, the neutron being the initial fundamental plasma, breaks up into an electron-proton combination, plus the release of energy, which is we call a PM tick. And so maybe, as we say, if we see the initial fundamental plasma being a red blood cell and the electron being a somatid, then what's the proton? And then if we see the relationship between the electron and the proton, then we can see the relationship between the red blood cell and the somatid. And we know that there is red blood, which flows through the arteries. And we know that there's a darker colored blood that flows through the veins. And they have different energy levels. And the station, shall we say, the main station of interaction physically is the heart. And it's connected to our emotion. We can't see this connection, but we know that in the process of what we call decay is coming down an energy level. So coming down an energy level comes to a lower energy level. And so we call that decay. But, in that process, because it's a two-way street, there's also natural creation. So if we go to a higher energy level, we call that natural creation. But it too is a two-way street. So to have a natural creation, you also have to have a natural decay. But there is a point of transmutation between the two. And that's a crossover point. And it's not visible. And that's the bonding point. And as per usual, we can't see it, but it's there. And we have difficulty explaining it. So as observers, we just have to fudge things. But in the plasma science, what we do know is that there's a magnetical gravitational relationship between the higher strength fields and the lower strength fields. So identify the field strength and connect the direction of flow. So whether we have a neutron in the field of creation, it will connect to an electron-proton combination in either direction, in either the field of creation or either the field of decay. And whether it's a neutron in the physicality or a neutron in the plasmatic state, it will maintain the connection in both states. And so imagine, if you will, you have a red blood cell, which is your large field, and it creates a somatid, which is a tiny body. We find that the somatid manifests itself from the red blood cell. And what is very, very interesting, I say interesting, is that cockroaches and somatids are able to withstand a nuclear attack. And when I say nuclear attack, I'm talking about bombs and explosions. So when we look at direction of flow and strength of flow, what we see is that a flow comes in and a flow goes out. But in that process, it doesn't necessarily have to just come in to one field. It can come into multiple fields. And in this picture, we see a serial connection. That is, one field is directly after another field. And so to get this energy moving, there has to be a pressure. So as the energy comes in, there's a pressure at the front, and as such, that pressure flows all the way to the side. And it is because of that pressure that the energy flows from left to right. But in order for the energy to flow out, there has to be a back pressure. And that back pressure is actually increasing, isn't it? As you're going to the right, until the point where it kind of has to get released. So it's kind of like our musical chairs. We've come to the exit point, which is in the center of our target, and it has to go out. Where? Where does it go? So this helps us in understanding cups of life. We created physical cups, and inside we created gas. And we created in a field of water, which has a high salt content, but it's transparent. And the area around the cup Well, that's also transparent. So we find that this Gans actually came from nothing. But as we know, nothing is nothing. So what we created inside the cup, where there was nothing, we created a magnetical field and a gravitational field. And we created two cups, and we found a relationship of one being emotional and one being physical. And there's a perception that this so-called pandemic is over. It's not over. And not only that, it's part of life. So if we have a specific requirement for emotional or physical, keep these batches apart. Because you'll find that inside we create the GANs of copper, GANs of zinc, the GANs of carbon dioxide, calcium, amino acid, and water. A lot going on inside the cups of life. And when we bring all these cups of life together, each of them has a unique purpose. And together, they all work together. And they create a magnetical field and a gravitational field. And then they manifest a soul field. And so we find that we have a physical matter state, which we can touch and we can see. And we say physically we can feel it. But we have a plasmatic state, which we call the matter-gen state. We can't touch it, we can't see it, but we can feel it. Isn't that strange? So we have a feeding system and a feedback system. And this is the common denominator in all of us. And then the question becomes, which is the dominant denominator? In which state do you matter? Do you even matter? In which state are you feeding? And in which state are you giving the feedback? Or which state is feeding you? And which state is feeding back to you? Fortunately, we have a default state because you were born. That's your confirmation. And so you came through an energy pack. And in that energy pack, you had a kind of aminogen. And it's unique because we have over 7 billion people on this planet at this time. And they're all different. They're all unique. And so this creates a spice of life. This variety. And this variety comes from a dilution of composite plasma charges. So an energy pack is we could say that an energy pack is an energy pack is an energy pack, but that would be false. Because each energy pack has its own composition, its own flavor, and its own strength. And so that strength gets manifest through the spirit and the soul. So your default energy is your soul pack. And your interacting field forces is your spirit pack. And the interaction of those manifests into the physicality. The dream energy is the interaction between the energy packs of the PM ticks in the universe and the manifestation of you on this planet. And you know that because you were born. And so the question comes, why did you shoot for this planet? You could have shot for any planet, right? But you came here. So the physical destination state comes from the dynamic transfer state, which comes from the interaction of the feeding and the feedback. And this feeding and feedback is a continuous process. So we find that the vertical stacker unit that we made is representative of our physical process. And the universal cup is a physical representation of our plasmatic process. The interaction between these two is not visible. The crossover point is the vanishing point. And this vanishing point is also the point of transparency, because the universe can see it. They can see everything. You can see right through the physicality. Why are we having this problem? Or is it that we don't understand how this feeding process works? So when we look at a maggrav is a conversion unit which allows energy to come in and more energy to come in. So this process starts with attraction and manifests into absorption. And all of this is representational of gravitational field forces. But before the energy can come in, it has to go out. And more energy can go out. So this goes through the process of repulsion. And in that process of repulsion, which we call emission, it's done through magnetical field forces. So these field forces of magnetical and gravitational operate with respect to this Earth and with respect to us between the crust of the Earth and the magnetosphere. But there's a plasma core, and this plasma core dictates the susceptibility. And when we say susceptibility, we also have to say susceptibility of what? So we're going to talk about more of that next week when we harvest this energy. But in the meantime, what we want to talk about is how this energy radiates. So last week we talked about the moon and its shine. And we found that there's a shiny part of the moon and there's a not shiny part of the moon. And so when we identify the moon, we identify it by what we see. We don't identify it by what we don't see. And an interesting thing is that the rotation of the moon itself is constant with respect to Earth. So there is a bright side of the moon and a dark side of the moon. And we never get to see the dark side of the moon. So when we talk about the moon rotation, that's the moon rotation rotating with respect to the Earth and its relationship with the sun. Because what we're seeing from the moon, because it's illuminated, is the sun light reflecting off of the moon. And so what we're not seeing is the irradiation of the moon in the moon night time. Just like on Earth, we don't see in the dark. So that's the difference between radiation and irradiation. If you look in Wikipedia, you will find different meanings of it. But the original meaning, the difference between radiation, which is the presence of the sun, the presence of the sunshine, and irradiation is the absence of the sunshine. So the irradiation is energy in motion, and it is affected by the moonshine, and it is affected by the earthshine. And as a result, it is also affected by the soulshine. And we've discussed that. But today, we want to talk more about the sunshine. And the most important thing about the sunshine, besides the fact that it makes us happier, is that plants grow in the sunshine. So the longer the sun shines during the day, the more the plants grow. So we find in the summertime, we have longer hours of sunlight. And in the wintertime, we have shorter hours of sunlight. So as a result, we find that in the summer, the plants are growing above the ground. And they're growing above the ground from a root. So the root is in the ground. So how can the root grow if it doesn't see the sunlight? So we say that the root will grow from the energy that it gets from the plant above the ground. So the energy from the sun is transferred to the plant, and from the plant, it's transferred to the root. So you say that's how the root grows. But the truth is the root growth is done at night. The plant growth above the ground is done during the daylight. So the truth is that the root growth is growth from the energy derived from the irradiation of the earth. And the plant growth above the ground grows from the radiation from the sun. And the frequency of the light that the sun emits due to the curvature of the earth is the action that crosses the crossover point between day and night. Because at some point in time, there is a crossover with respect to the energy absorption. So in the morning, there is a turning on. At noon is the maximum intensity. In the evening, there's a turning off. And at night, it's dark. And so we find that the soul of the body, with respect to the vertical people, is in the root. Nope, I had that backwards. Sorry, gang. The soul of the body is in the plant. The soul of the root, the soul of the plant is in the root. And the reason we know that is because in the wintertime, plants that we call a perennial, that is a plant that can go into so-called hibernation or dormancy, state of suspended animation. It will lose the plant above the ground, and the life force, which is the sap, will drain out of the plant and converge in the root. And so there it'll preserve the root for a point in time when the winter turns to summer and the plant will start to grow again. This is how the vertical people do it. Bears do the same thing. They hibernate in the winter. Bears are horizontal people. We're not bears, and the only time we hibernate is at night. And so we hibernate at night, every night, but we're up every day during the day, assuming that we have vitality of our emotion and our physicality in order to do that. So there is energy that is coming from the sun, and there's energy that is coming from the earth, and there is a convergence of this energy at the center, and it causes a physical manifestation. So when we're talking about the sunshine, we're talking about the physical manifestation of the sun energy. And when we're talking about the earth shine, we're talking about the physical manifestation of the energy. And when we're talking about the aura of the plant or the aura of the horizontal people, we're talking about the physical manifestation of energy. So all of this is representative of the physical state. And so we're locked into this because of this energy equation where energy equals the mass times the speed of light squared. And we say that the speed of light is constant and the speed of light is the maximum speed. In order for the speed of light to be constant, it has to have a constant relationship between energy and mass. So we know that energy is variable. So if the light is constant, the only way the energy can be variable is if the mass is variable. But if the mass is constant, how can the energy be variable? You can't have the mass constant and the speed of light constant and the energy variable. Impossible. So where does this energy come from? One root. A sip of tea gives you a moment to contemplate that question. Why do we want the speed of light constant? What is beyond the speed of light? We can't see. It's not there. It's invisible. And so we find that it's a different set of rules, a set of rules that the universal community understands. The reason the universal community understands that is they're operating in an invisible environment, invisible to us. Our environment is transparent to them. So they understand the morality as a field energy and the compassion and the courage. These are all part and parcel of creation, fields of creation. And so they follow universal laws of ethics. So if we wish to follow the universal laws, then we have to pattern man-made laws accordingly. Because really the only modification of man-made laws has to do with the difference between the physical reality and the plasma reality. So as we discussed about the inverse square law, This is not a man-made law. It's a man-made interpretation of a universal law. And so what we're looking at is from point of observation. And we say that if we half the distance, then double the intensity. Or if we double the distance, then we halve the intensity. So the speed of light is constant. So there's a relationship between distance and intensity. And so we see that in the rainbows. But in this particular picture, we have two rainbows, a double rainbow. And what it brought to your attention was that the bright rainbow that's visible, the inside curve is violet, the outside curve is red. The second rainbow that's not as clearly visible, the outside curve is violet, the inside curve is red. What I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact is that inside the first rainbow, the sky is kind of gray. And since we usually see rainbows after a rainstorm, when it's raining, it's, kind of dark, even though it's in the middle of the afternoon. So the rainbow really shows itself when there is rain still in the air, water droplets are still in the air, and the sun is shining. So the sun is kind of reflecting off of these raindrops and creates a rainbow. And you always find that the rainbow is curving around the earth. And then you look in the sky outside the second rainbow, and you see that the dark clouds are pretty much the same. But interestingly, in between the two rainbows, it's of a different color, hard to explain, but it's darker. So what is not visible in terms of color of the rainbow is actually a darker area than the rest. And as this is all transparent, the background is really the dark clouds. So this is a unique thing. But when we look at light, and we talked about distance and intensity, and we find that it's the inverse square law, we find that the wavelength of the light is within a range for each color, and the frequency is increasing or decreasing inversely to the wavelength. So in other words, the shorter the wavelength, the higher the frequency. The longer the wavelength, the less the frequency. And so this identifies each color that we can see. And then when you look at the highest energy level, the highest frequency, you find it has the shortest wavelength, 380 nanometers. And 1 angstrom is 1/10 of a nanometer. And we found that the illumination on a cinematoscope was 150 angstroms. 150 angstroms compared to the lowest wavelength on the color chart, which is 380 nanometers, or in angstroms, it would be 3,800 angstroms. So in the visible color spectrum, in the visible color spectrum is 3,800 angstroms. In the somatoscope spectrum, it's 150. Wow, what a difference. And beyond the violet is ultraviolet. And beyond the red, well, guess what? It's infrared. And so these are not visible to the naked eye, but we have equipment that can see that. So we know which direction this energy is going. And so we've determined that because the two rainbows are going in the same arc, that this is the Earth view. So we have a feeding system from somewhere, and what we're seeing is the rainbow, which is a feedback system. So the physicality is the feedback system. And so within the first rainbow is a feedback system. And outside of the second rainbow is the same feedback system. But in between this dark area is the feeding system. And we find in this dark area here is the infrared. So the infrared is the lower energy being of a lower energy state. How low can you go? We know that we can't go to nothing, because if we go to nothing, something happens. So we found that when we see this point in between the two rainbows, we find that based on the color, we can see the color. So the color has the same frequency and wavelength when both rainbows. But you have a different distance. So based on the color is at the constant speed. All the colors are at the same speed. So if you have the same speed but a different distance, then that means you have a different color. But they are different in terms of gravitational strength. So that accounts for the difference in intensity. The outside rainbow doesn't have the same intensity as the inside rainbow. It only has the same color, which represents the frequency of the light. So if you're having the same frequency and the same speed, and you have a different distance, then at some point there's a crossover. And that's a crossover, how we said, takes you into a different dimension. So that makes sense, doesn't it? Your feedback is in the 3 dimension, and your feeding system is in the 4th dimension. And we as observer participants are in the 4th dimension because we're observing the 3 dimensions of physicality. And that's our point of view. And likewise, that's the Earth's point of view, because we are on the Earth, in the physicality of the Earth. And our body has manifested into that physicality. That's the matter plasma of the Earth view. And so the crossover of the 2 rainbows is not a reflection, it's an inversion. So that inversion is gone through beyond the point, this in between here, which the 2 rainbows have vanished in the middle there. And so we find that this is the point of transmission between the two rainbows. There is a field of containment between the two rainbows. And we know that this field of containment, therefore, because it follows a rotating path, is transmission. And so we find that the peace stone that we're creating, which is a field of containment around the world, is a form of transmission. So the direction of flow and the compass that you need means that you need a different way of navigating with respect to this peace stone. And as such, you can go from one dimension to another dimension, and what we call at the point of death, the crossing of the Brillo. But now with the new plasma science, we can cross the Brillo without having to die in the physicality. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because we talked about it last week, is because if these rainbows were a reflection, and so here we have a rainbow, just happened a few days ago. And if we look at the bottom picture, and you see that the inside of the rainbow is ultraviolet, and the sky is brighter than outside of the red part of the rainbow. In other words, on the left of the picture, the sky is darker. The same thing happens. And we don't have a second rainbow in this picture. But if we were to do a second rainbow and to do it the same way, whereas the ultraviolet or the violet is on the outside and the red on the inside, we basically have to turn this upside down. And when we turn it upside down, we find that the curvature of the rainbow is opposite. So it is not an earth rainbow. That would be a sun rainbow. So when we see two rainbows and they are reflecting each other, they are both earth rainbows, and they are inverted because the color sequence is opposite. So the energy that comes from the sun would follow the path of the upside down rainbow in the top half of this picture. But we don't see a rainbow from the sun. When the sun is shining, we only see an earth rainbow. And when we look at the sky, when we don't have a rainbow, and when the sun is shining, we see a blue sky. And what is that blue sky? Well, that is the inside of our earth rainbow. And when we take the sun away and we look into the night sky, we don't see any color. It's dark. There's no sunlight. So this is why we ask, are we backwards or are we upside down? Or, if the sun is not shining, have we vanished? And so when we look at our compass position, every which way you look is north. We don't know if we're coming or going. So how do we navigate? How do we navigate through this universe? And when we see the relationship of man's tiny universe, that little red dot, tiny, tiny, And then you look at the vastness of the universe. It's big, 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 big. And you kind of look at the difference between the red blood cell and the somatite. And you know what the difference is macroscopically, microscopically, or nanoscopically. So our point of view, which is your default point of view, because you were born with that, is your point of view is the dynamic plasma state of your soul. And that dilutes down through your dream state and crosses the vanishing point and is inverted through the point of transparency into your physicality. But your physicality is connected to your emotion. And so this emotion becomes your point of transparency, because a good poker player can tell what you're holding. And the universal community can also tell if you're lying. So there's no poker playing in outer space. So these are the skills that we have to learn. How to go from our gravitational state to a magnetical state. And so that's what I want to talk about today. You're thinking, well, what have you been talking about? I've been talking about the soul limitations, because the soul limitations is what we are experiencing in the present, and it has a total relationship to the emotion of the past. So the combination of the emotion of the past and the emotion of the present is affecting our future. And that's the emotion of the future. And what we have to understand is that we do not have to feed the emotion of the future from the emotion of the past. We can transcend that. We can elevate our emotion to understand that the universe, the way the universe is feeding, and the feedback that we give it is something that we have a control over, because we are the independent variable. But we depend on other independent variables. And we all depend on this feedback, because this feedback affects the feeding. And so we get a chance to decide. And when we forget where we came from, and we forget that the interaction of the soul of the man and the soul of the body has a connection to the physicality, and that the connection is through the emotion. And when we try and manipulate that and forget that when we were born, we succeeded on trust. But trust of what? We trusted the feeding, not the feedback. So why are we only trusting the feedback? This is part of the skills we have to learn. And so we find that we are in a tug of war between our feeding system and our feedback system. And we are anchored and mired in this mud, if you will. It's affecting our soul, and it's limiting our soul. And so we find that the creation of plasma matter, the principal matter of the plasma matter, comes from this feeding and this feedback. So the feeding comes from the PM ticks through the universe, and the feedback comes from the interaction of the fields of the soul of the earth and the soul of the sun. And these interactions we call inertia. And every time they manifest themselves, there is a conclusion. There is a conflict resolution. That conflict resolution is always a plasmagen conversion. We have a choice in how to do that. So what we're feeding our planet is what we have. So we have a choice in what we feed. And since the planet rotates, this feeding field also rotates. And as you can see, the feedback is always coming from the planet and from us. So life is for learning. And when you make a mistake, it teaches you what you did wrong. And then if you make a mistake again, that means you're doing it the same way wrong. So we have an opportunity to learn. And the better we learn, the less the consequences of our mistakes. So we all are on a different level, except for one small little detail. We all come from the Creator. And if we disconnect from the Creator, then we operate by man-made rules. But if we connect to the Creator, then we connect to universal rules. And the universal rules feed our intention. And our intention is specific to us. So that's what we feed. And our feedback is environment specific. So that's what we feed back. And the combination of those two is the manifestation between the emotions of presence and the presence of physicality. So how well we learn our lessons is affecting this rate of transmission. And this is not taking into account the sunshine. What we said with the moonshine is this is where the vanishing point meets the point of transparency. And in our physicality as a human being, we have a super granular layer. And that is the point of inversion, where the soul that is within can shine without. That's the presence of the soul shine. And so what is the sunshine? The sun also has a vanishing point which meets the point of transparency. So the surface of the sun is the point of inversion. What we see as the sun is the presence of the sunshine. We don't see the sun. Just like we don't see the auras. The auras in our body, it's not a reflection of us. It's not symmetrical to our soul on the inside, and it's not asymmetrical. It's an inversion where the soul in the inside has an energy field on the outside. This irradiance that comes out, just like the somatid comes out of the blood cell. That's the essence of creation. And that crossover point is the inversion of the energy field from the red blood cell to the somatid. And so that crossover point is the presence of emotion, where the somatid comes from the red blood cell, because life wants to live. And when the red blood cell is not healthy, the somatid does not make its presence. That's a fact. So the irradiance, the presence of the earth shine, the presence of the red blood vessels shine, and the presence of the soul shine. We say when someone comes into a room, oh, how you light up the room. You have a radiant glow. Yes, but you can't see it, right? It's not visible. You can only feel it. So that radiance is a reaction of the irradiance. That's what you're feeling. But the radiance is not what you're seeing. What you're seeing in the terms of the aura is the plasma field around. And so your aura reflects what you are feeding. So where you in the center are reflecting through what we call a decay process, the electron-proton combination. And in the process, you're creating these PM ticks. And so these PM ticks are transitioned out of the North Pole and they come into the South Pole. So they are magnetically feeding from the North Pole and gravitationally feeding back at the South Pole. So the question becomes, how can the PM tick be released? And then how can the PM tick be fed back? So now you're assuming it's the same PM tick. So first of all, the irradiance is following a path. And there are many paths. But you can give a part of yourself, because as a person walks into the room and you say they're beaming, so they're conveying energy to everybody else, and say they light up a room, they are giving energy, they're giving off energy. Are they becoming consumed? No, they're sharing. They're giving off, and it's indiscriminate. They have to give off in every direction. So in other words, the sun shines on us in the daytime, but in the nighttime, we don't see the sun, but the sun is still shining on us because it's shining from the backside. And we know that because we see the sun reflecting off of the moon. So the sun doesn't turn off. The sun continually glows. And so that's what we do. We glow the same way. But what is the intensity? So there's a limitation to how far we go. So what is the difference? So if you look at a radiant flash, that is a temporary feeding, right? And when you look at the core and you see how bright it is, you see that on the outside, it's not as bright. And in fact, in between the inside and the outside, you can see different layers, kind of like a rainbow, except they're all the same color, but of different intensity. But this is temporary because it's just a flash. You see, when we're doing feeding, that is a feeding radiance. And when we're feeding back, we're also feeding back a radiance. But where from? We didn't say where from. What are the possibilities? So one of the possibilities is you can feed yourself. Another possibility is you can feed from the environment. Another possibility is you can feed from another plasma source. And of course, another possibility is you can get fed from the sun. Oh, by the way, you can also get fed from the Creator. All of this comes together. So the question then becomes, on the emission, the PM-TIC emission that follows this path, that is outside of the physicality, how does it become part of the gravitational side? We know that the gravitational side is more dense. In order to be more dense, it has to have more mass. So in the process of gathering this mass, then there has to be an emission and there has to be an absorption. So in terms of the emission, the magnetical has to be stronger. In terms of the absorption, the gravitational has to be stronger. How can the emission become stronger? How can the emission become absorption? The difference between one position and the next position is the gravitational energy, the absorption of energy. So you have a PM-TIC on the path, and you have PM-TICs from the Creator. And when two forces come together, they form another. And you have to give before you receive, because you have to make room to be able to receive. So if you emit, and if your position is constant, then the only thing that you can absorb is also constant. But if you want to move, to change your position, you still have to emit, but you have to absorb more in order to move, because you're going from the transition of the North Pole to the South Pole. So in other words, you're going from the emission pole to the absorption pole. And in order to be absorbed, you have to be more gravitational. However, as you emit because it's a higher energy. So in order to absorb, you have to absorb a lower energy. So now you have a conundrum. To move on this path, you have to have a higher energy. So in other words, you can't be in the same dimension. So when we look at the universal principle, universal line maps, magnetic fields, and when we flatten the fields, we create a shimmering. The same thing as you drive a long straight road on a hot summer day, far in the distance, the opaque asphalt turns into a shiny surface. And so your vision goes out and your feedback of the vision comes back. But as it becomes flatter, it becomes shinier. And the turn from the going out to the coming back becomes more and more like a hairpin, which I've represented in this safety pin. And so it's very difficult to navigate this turn. And in fact, there's no reason to navigate this turn, except there has to be a maggrav position so that you can capture this field of rotation. So at the point of transition, where it's transitioning from magnetical to gravitational with respect to your point of view. So if you're in the center and you're looking at the end point, it has to go through a rotating field. So that rotating field is when these 2 points are coming together, that creates a maggrav condition. So other energy packs, when they go to that field, can be absorbed in that field, and then that field can emit. I'm never saying is that energy that is being emitted the same as that energy that's being absorbed. There's no rule that says it has to be the same one. So if the emission is first and the absorption is second, they can't be one and the same. And we know that from Hermann Wheel. So if this energy is combining with another energy, where is that energy coming from? So when you have two fields come together, then they create another. So they cannot be in the same dimension. So when you look at the one field, it's missing something. That part that you cannot see. And so the point is that that rotating field, when it's on the inside, is rotating around the core. And that field on the outside, which is an inversion field, isn't it? It's an inversion. It too is rotating around the core. In both cases, that core is not visible. And in the picture, the colored fields are also not visible. Well, as a matter of fact, the safety pin is not visible. Nothing is visible here. What you have is two fields coming together, creating a rotating field, and then the energy is being transmitted because there's a certain pressure. So it has to go somewhere. And so on the physical dimension, it goes around the physical construct. On a plasmatic dimension, it goes between the rotating field of the safety pin and the rotating field of the colored ribbons. So inside the core, there's an emission and there's an absorption. And of course, it goes both ways, doesn't it? So when you have a negative charge as emit, and you know the two negatives repel. So this is where you have a field that goes to the right and one field goes to the left. And depending on the field strength, you have different fields, different paths to follow. And so there's a relationship between each of these fields. which is why you would have different field strengths. And because these fields are moving, it means that they are gathering energy because they are increasing in mass. They are becoming more gravitational. And so that energy is coming from another source. So with respect to our physicality, our solar system, that energy is coming from the sun. But with respect to the universe, that energy is coming from the creator. And it is the interaction of these two fields that is creating another field. So if the energy is coming from the creator and the energy is coming from our solar system, and the manifestation is our soul, then the path that our soul follows has decided to manifest itself in the physicality of our bodies. And so we see that there's a sequencing of the souls. So first of all, there's a soul of the sun, and there's a soul of the earth. So this is what attracts the soul of the man. So that is the convergence point for the soul of the man. But if you have the soul of the earth plus now the soul of the man, that attracts the soul of the body. What is the soul of the body? Is that a reflection of the soul of the man? No, that's an inversion. And you know that because for those who have had an out-of-body experience, know that when they exit the body and turn around and look at the body, they don't recognize themselves because they don't look the way you look. They look the way other people see you. And then the soul of the earth plus the soul of the body manifests itself in the physicality of the body. And so this becomes the default pathway of the manifestation. And the divergence comes in the physicality and the manifestation of the physicality. So it's not that it's man-made, it's the role of man. And the role of man has now extended its capabilities to provide vertical enhancement units and horizontal enhancement units, which are able to facilitate our presence in the physicality. And furthermore, to mitigate the energy binding problems that we have on this planet, where we like to cross and double cross people at the expense of others. Because we see that through the killing and through jealousy and through kingship, that we seem to create a superiority. And so this default pathway disappears through those activities. But when you realize that you're limiting not only the soul, but because the soul manifests the physicality, then you're also limiting the physicality. And so if you're looking at domination, the physical domination is the weakest point. And why do you want to strengthen that weakest point? Because the limitation has already been put in place. The only way that you can strengthen that is to elevate the man to a higher level. And what's wrong with that? The universal community has already done that, and they're waiting. They're waiting for us because the universal community is waiting for us with an unconditional feeding. We continue to gravitate to this conditional feeding. So This is the difference between the physical reality and the plasma reality. So if you understand the essentials for life physically are air, water, food, and shelter. And we know who the feeders are, and we know who the terrorists are, because we understand which is which. But when we examine the default position, these are not necessarily essentials for life. These become essentials for lying, because then we become hooligans. So it's now we're coming to a point where we have questions of what we can harvest. So when we harvest our vitality, that is our soul essence. That's the plasma reality. And when we harvest our physicality, that becomes material enhancement. And so this connection, this emotion of presence becomes the connection from the source to the earth. And there's only one way to maintain that connection, and that is through peace. But we have to go through the state of ignorance. So through the various teachings that we have through the community, ignorance is only when you're unaware. And as you learn, you become aware, so you don't become ignorant. But what if you're aware and unwilling? You're not only ignorant, but you end up to be corrupt. And that's not an insult, because you can't insult the ignorant. So we understand the maladies on this planet. And now we have an opportunity to cross over these bridges and connect these bridges. The most rock solid bridge that you have is the bridge of knowing. And the reason for that is because that puts you on the road to transparency. The transparency not only of your source of creation, but also the source of motivation of the other souls on this planet. And we all know that we came here for a purpose. And as we learn, we identify what that purpose is. And if we can't put our finger on it, we know by connection through our dream state that we know that these possibilities are there. We can connect with our mind, we can connect with the soul of the body, and we can connect with the soul of the man, and connect to the universe. So the difference between the earth space, which we're accustomed to, and the outer space, which we claim to conquer, we can't see it. There's an intermediate state, and this is the plasmagen state. This is the point of transmutation. It's how we got here, and it's how we can become soul travelers. And so the first thing that we wish to do is to help all those young men who have joined the military and, shall we say, become witnesses to a certain kind of pain. And so the Vision Enhancement Unit is part of the gift to the US military for PTSD recovery. And this PTSD recovery will be done through the plasmagen, the interaction between the physicality and the soul. So now we understand that when someone asks you, what is plasma? Tell them it's a kind of energy state, and there are different kinds of energy states. And you know that because when you go to sleep, you have a dream. And you know that your dream state transcends the limitations of science. And so it's very important for you to learn that. we've come to an existential crisis where if we don't learn it and we don't see it as important, then we could just basically say that nothing is important. This is the most important thing, is to understand the relationship between the scientific community and the spiritual community. This is where the plasma science adds to the knowledge. We have a relationship between the magnetical and gravitational fields, creates a balance, and it wants to move. And so in order to move, it has to change. And so the question is, at what rate of change? And so now we better understand these relationships, or we understand these relationships better. There's an outer space. It's like the plasma fields, the photon, the energy packs, representative of the soul of the sun. We can't see it. Then there's the inner space, the particles, the waves, the soul of the man. Then there's the earth space. This is where we have the non-visible emotion and the visible physical, which is represented by the soul of the body. There's a relationship, the soul of the sun, the soul of the man, and the soul of the body. And here we are on Earth. And as we line up the new spaceships getting ready to travel, it will put us in touch with the universal community. And so we are now at the point where we can go beyond that vanishing point, or come back from that point of transparency, which gives us the opportunity to experience dematerialization and materialization, and to transcend both in both directions as free will. So now we understand better what the manifestation is. You have the difference between what we think is the stacker unit and the universal reality. It's all the same. Two fields come together to form another. The formation of any field is a manifestation. But why are some fields glowing and some fields a flash? So it all depends on the source. And if it's the plasma feeding, which is what leads to this manifestation. And so the difference between whether it's tangible or visible or plasmatic has to do with our emotion of presence, because our emotion of presence is a form artifact of this energy in motion. And so in both cases, whether it's a physical reality or a plasmatic reality, that manifestation is a touchy-feely form artifact. So we can feel the emotion of presence, can't we? And so this is the difference as we navigate between Earth space and outer space. The Universal Council is endeavoring to help man elevate to the position via the Universal Council to integrate with the universal community. It's not just what we as Earth beings want, it's what the universal community wants. And why is that so hard? Well, it's because some people don't want to understand this connection, that the universe is connected, not directly, contiguously. And it's done this connection by the feeding and the feedback. So the feedback comes from the environment, and we are that environment. But the feeding comes from the universe. And in turn, we have that capability to feed our environment as well. So we have this duality of being able to be the feeder and be the feedback provider. And because of this free will, we can decide what we want to feed and what we wish to feed back. And in order for us to understand the difference between this inner space and outer space, all we have to do is trust in the default position, because that is what connects us to the Creator. And so when we talk about, let's say, radar love, what does that mean? That means there's a connection and our cells know it. And when we understand the love, the cells work properly. Why do the cells work properly? Because this connection affects us emotionally. And what is the result? The result is the production of somatids. When we function properly, the somatids manifest, and they come from the red blood cells. And we can see that if we would have microscopes be used for what they should be used for and become legal. So now we know that for some reason they are illegal. So we have to fudge things. So with the plasma science, we now understand that the PM ticks are the fudge factor. The fudge factor which facilitates creation, that facilitates decay, and facilitates the bond between the creation and the decay. And both are a two-way street. The magnetical gravitational connection, the essence of the motion from the magnetical to the gravitational and the gravitational to the magnetical via the PM ticks fudge factor. And so now we know how the peace dome is created. We can create that peace dome. And the reason for that is because by feeding the peace dome, we are only half the equation. The peace dome is also fed by the universal community, and they need the peace dome as well. So plasma is a barrier of fields, or plasma is also an absorber of fields. And so this is done emotionally through the emotional transformation that goes from the dream state to the awake state, what we call the aminogen state to the post-amino acid state. And there's nothing wrong with being man-made, because men are made of dreams. And dreams make the man. So when we're looking for this greater oneness, we have to understand that the greater oneness is not the selfishness, but it's the common good. And so if you have this glow where you're feeding the radiance and you feed back the radiance, then you can achieve this greater oneness more effectively. So you can do more, be more effective. And this is what we want to do. We want to get back to normal, where the majority seek freedom and emancipation. This is normal in the universe. And the earth is part of this universe. So the earth also seeks freedom and emancipation. That is their purpose. So from this gravitational point, which is the convergence of the attraction and repulsion forces, we become the magnetical residue, the independent variable, each one, so that we can work in this interdependent universe and reach one. So all we have to do is just reach one and create an emotional transformation and teach one to understand the benefits of one nation, one planet, one universe in a multipolar world, in a diverse world. We're all investors in this club we call Earth. And as such, as being part of the universe, we are all investors in the other club, which we call the universe. That's why the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute is presenting this plasma science and calling all Earth shareholders who are near and far. We need a peace treaty. Sign it. Sign it with a pen and sign it with the heart. Sign it with your emotion and sign it with your soul. That's how we can get this physical and emotional transfer rate to change, because it depends on the source and balance of the feeding and the feedback systems. So the universal language of freedom is to listen to and understand the default position. The default position is that the plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the outer space age. That's the end of the lesson. Thank you so much for listening. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Alex. I don't know if I absorbed everything from it, but very interesting, and you've covered a lot of topics there. But today we're talking about getting in touch with our soul, this transmutation. And I'm trying to connect what you just shared with this whole idea of transmutation and going into your, bringing your physicality into the soul in so many ways. And how that is done. I mean, when you go into the universal unit, it seems to could happen immediately. But I guess we just have to work on it more ourselves and get to that point where we can. I was thinking about keeping the cage, this bird cage, open and trusting the soul, more or less. But there's must be some techniques. I know he said it's like the marathon. We do need some practice in doing this. The systems are there to help or guide us, show us how, but also I would like to be able to do it on demand, so to speak, without a system there. I know Mr. Kesha talked about some of the equipment he had in his lab was not allowed to be in the public, but apparently certain governments had given him certain equipment that he could test with or play with, and therefore it's not illegal, I guess, if the government shares it with you. I just want to share for a minute, and then you can take the screen back. This is something Gunther shared about a year ago with us, and this is I guess it's the most detailed picture of a cell up to that point in time. I just thought I'd share it to see what the soul has done, and I know we're a compressed universe, but the detail in this picture, and I'm sure if you had one of the microscopes you were talking about, it'd probably be even more detailed. But this is just one cell. I'm not sure what kind of cell it is, but it's just an amazing construction that the soul is able to carry out. So we're carrying around this soul, but sometimes we don't give it the credit that it deserves. I know Mr. Kesh said it carries a double PhD in this knowledge, but this is a real beauty of a creation of one cell. So we do need to trust the soul more and go into it, somehow go deep inside ourselves. I don't know what triggers that. When you go into the unit, apparently it's triggered immediately. But for us to do it on our own, it doesn't seem like that many people are able to do this, like a dream state, but you're fully aware and awake of what's going on. As Mr. Kesh said, he could see his physical body on the bed or in the chair, and he said, you know, I'll be back to He wanted to go explore the universe or other things. Okay, Alex, would you take the screen back, please? I just wanted to show this beautiful picture of this one cell and look at the complexity and the intricacies of this one cell. And we're a collection of trillions, 30 trillion or more cells, similar, probably very similar to this. So I think maybe we need to give the soul a little bit or a lot more respect. As far as the feeding goes, I think it's doing very good with the 80%, but it's not enough. And even if you are still eating, and I would imagine most people are still eating that go into the unit or, consuming something along that line, it still happens. You'll still be able to move about. I know Mr. Kesh now is not the time for jokes about Christ and his physicality, but apparently he does have a number of them, which he shared a couple with us. So Christ wasn't also so perfect in his physicality. I remember at one point, Mr. Kesh said he wished he had the life of Christ, lived at the top of the society, the most beautiful women, great wine. He said it was like a 24-hour disco to be in the presence of Christ. So he was very happy and jovial, although he was accused of hanging around or being in the company of gluttonous men and wine bibbers. I think that was in one of the holy books, let's say. But it's just amazing what the soul that we're carrying around, that we've never really been aware of it. And now I think it's time for us to become more in touch with it, because it is quite a master of this creation and of the universe, apparently. It doesn't need this physical body to survive. It has its own life, but I need to spend more time, I think, going into myself somehow. And why I can't do it on my own as fast as I could in a system, or maybe I can, I'm just doubting myself and just denying it to myself. But I am going to work on this, going inside and integrating with my own soul.
Well, Mark, one of the prime motivators for conflict is having life essentials. And so one of the things that I became aware of many years ago was how we can eliminate the dependence on life essentials. And when I say the dependence, that dependence has to do with a lack of availability. So there's two ways to have a lack of availability, obviously, is one, to not be able to provide the life essentials for yourself. And the other way, of course, is to deny those life essentials. So that's the difference between a provider and a terrorist. But what the plasma science has done has gone beyond that. And not only has it negated the need for terrorist activity, but it has eliminated the life essentials the way we interpret it. So in other words, the whole purpose of the life essentials, and let's take the first three: air, food, and water. The common denominator for those three is oxygen, and the common connector is carbon. So, when you look at the need of an essential, of those three, the food is the last. You can live without food for an extended period. You can live without water, but for a very short period. And you can live without air. Well, I think the world record for holding your breath is around 6 or 7 minutes. And I don't think anybody on this panel could come anywhere near close to that. So the urgency dictates the need. And so, of course, providers know this, and terrorists know this. So, your decision to be one or the other affects, the sequence of operation. But with the plasma science, we have transcended that need. In other words, so we can provide that need for ourselves. But like you say, we are only at the point of awareness, and I'm talking about the majority of us. We're at the point of awareness, but that doesn't mean there aren't those who can transcend these energy levels and do that more efficiently. So I'm with you on that particular point. I can't do that. However, necessity is the mother of invention. And we're coming to an existential crisis on this planet. And one of the reasons we're coming to that is because the need for terrorism is now being eliminated. And if we hope to eliminate the need for terrorism, we cannot do this through terrorist activity. We have to do this through plasma science. And the reason for that is because the terrorist activity, through its physicality, does affect our emotional system. But the plasma science transcends that and goes to the soul level. And so when the higher energy feeds the lower energy, then we need to shift from the emotional feeding, which feeds our physicality, to the soul feeding, which feeds our emotional and our physical combined. And it's this graduation that is going to bring peace on this planet. So you can't bring peace through war. You can only bring peace through peace and harmony. And peace and harmony comes when you have the essentials of life freely available, because then you don't need to steal. But that need for stealing violates universal laws. And so why is that a universal law? Because the essence of creation is to create life. So if you are not allowing life to have the essentials of life, you're violating the universal laws of creation. And why would you do that? So that means that you are not interested in going into outer space. You are working in the physical realm of the earth space and the inner space. And so the only reason that we see the difference between earth space and inner space is because of the color of the sky. So we know that we can see the sky becomes blue in the daytime and it's hard for us to see through it. But at nighttime, when it turns dark, we can see completely through it. But you see, everything that we can see is physical. What we don't see is the plasmatic reality, which is the substructure behind that. And so it is that plasmatic reality, which is the real reality, because the only way that it works through is through the truth, justice, and love. It fails to function when the love is not there. And the love is not there via hate. Hate doesn't exist. There is only love or not love. You can only give or not give. Those are the only two options. And so when we decide to take, we are actually disrupting that system. And it's creating a small scheme, and it's keeping our tiny little planet tiny. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was saying the dream state is what we call the dream state is actually more of the reality. I think our soul is probably more than willing to take the physicality around with it, but we never have asked. I mean, some people that live a full life never discovered their soul. They never had a chance to basically go deeper into the soul level. So I think the soul is very willing to do that, but we have to have that strong emotion to want to get into that position somehow. And I don't know if it depends on, you're not eating or you're still killing and eating, or it would still do it regardless of that. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's correct. It is regardless of that, because although today's subject was sunshine, I didn't talk much about sunshine, except for the fact is that the sunshine has a glow, right? Whereas the moonshine is a reflection, and the moonshine is temporary. The sunshine is continuous. So if you are radiant, but you look at someone who is radiant, they may put a glow on the room. And when they leave, you can say, well, the glow is gone. But they are not radiant the way the sun is radiant. They are irradiant. You can feel the presence. You can feel the energy. You can feel the vitality, the physical and emotional vitality. But there is no tangible glow like you see the tangible glow
Right.
from the sun. What you see is the soul behind it. So when you say, oh, you are so radiant, or she's so radiant, or you glow and light up the room, it's a figure of speech, but it's very apropos, because it's a extension of your soul. So your soul is having that impact. So that soul that is within you is having an impact that's outside of you. And this is the point that the sun can do, except that the difference between the sun is that it has a radiant glow, and we as humans have an irradiant glow. And the difference is enormous in terms of energy creation. So our existence is virtually totally dependent on the energy from the sun, whether it's daytime or nighttime. That is the point. But we also have an energy source. So the difference is the intensity of the soul of the sun versus the intensity of the soul of the earth, or versus the intensity of the soul of the man, right? So
Yeah.
the intensity of the soul of the sun is so bright, and it is so pure. And this is at a higher elevation of energy field strength than we are. And so when we're talking about elevating the soul, many of us can do out of body transmission. Many of us, or a transition, many of us can do soul travel. Many of us can do, how should we say it, walk into a different environment. Okay, but when we say many, it's still a very, very small percentage. So, but they are still not, shining like the sun. So they are on the path farther down the road. But it doesn't mean that we can't catch up, and it doesn't mean that they can't fall back. And that's the point. We all have this capability. We need to make this decision each and every day. So we are constantly being tested, and we are tested by the feeding that we get from the universe and the feedback that we get from the environment. And we are strong enough here to make that difference. Now, when we become awake to our capabilities, then we start to practice the right capabilities. So, whatever you give your time and attention to, that is what you're going to create. So that's a fact. So this is why, as we give our time and attention to the plasma science, give our time and attention to the peace stone, in your heart, in your soul, that these things are real. You've seen manifestations of this reality in different forms. Now you'll understand how to interpret them. This is what gives you the insight. Once you have that basic knowledge, then you have the insight, so that you don't need a lab to figure it out. Is that physical? Is that plasmatic? You have the basic criteria to differentiate, and how can you affect that? So we have matured in many ways, but it's only a small energy field, and that energy field is going to be amplified radically. And right now, the rate of change is far more rapid than it was even 10 years ago. So we're dealing not only with a different technology, but we're also dealing with a different change, a rate of change. And this is where the pressure comes in. And so we're seeing the events unfold. And so as we see the events unfold, you say there is a logical sequence. And then you see, for some reason, there's an illogical sequence. And so you ask yourself the question, why is one sequence illogical and why is one sequence logical? So that's the difference between the providers and the terrorists.
Well, I know our two souls are working closer together on a daily basis than we probably realize. So the jump or bridging that gap may not be as far as we think it is, just because we've never done it before. I know Selena is always talking about going places with her soul and things. I don't know if it's conscious all the time or mostly unconscious, but she does have some vivid interactions, and I think we can all do that. I know we can. And as far as the light, I know he said that the Universal Council would have this sort of light, but it wouldn't be like a light bulb light where they're all lit up in a way, but it would be sensed by the other souls that they're there to give and to serve. So it wouldn't be such a physical light or a glow. Maybe it would be, but it's more of a sense that the souls around them understand, I think, that they're there to serve and give.
But Mark, we're all in that same boat, you see.
Yeah.
So many of us are suggesting, I don't have the capability, so you pass that responsibility. And, we all have certain capabilities better than other capabilities. So we're all looking for our, I guess our specialty. What is becoming, not becoming, it is a fact that the plasma science transcends a lot of these knowledge bases, these fields of interest. It affects agriculture, it affects communication, right? It affects health, it affects space travel. So why is that? And the reason for it is because these are the universal forces that are affecting each and every one of these things. Each and every one of these fields is a byproduct of the universal field forces and how they converge. So what does that mean? The sun is shining all around the earth, but you have different types of climate, right? You have the Arctic, you have the tropic, and you have the temperate. And you have the tropical plants, you have the temperate plants, and you have, you know, plants in the tundra. That's just the living vegetation. How about the minerals? You have, you know, copper in Chile, oil in the Mideast, and gold in the Far East. Why is that? It's the same sun and it's the same earth. You could argue that there's no justification for that, but you know, that would be ignorant because you know that it exists. So you know it's there. So just because you can't explain it, that's not good enough. So what is the explanation? So the explanation is the inertia that is coming from the interaction of the fields that are becoming absorbed and the fields that are being emitted. And so the byproduct becomes the field of manifestation, whatever that is. So in other words, everything is a manifestation. And if it's everything, that includes everything.
Okay, let's see if we can open it up for others to make some comments or ask some questions, please. It'll be great to get to the point where no one can fool you anymore, especially if you're able to do these sort of go into the soul and travel with the soul. He said you won't need any messengers and there'll be no one there to fool you. No one can fool you after that point. And I think we're on the verge of it. We're very close. And these systems will allow us to bridge it, or we can do it before. I'm going to be working on trying to do it and get in touch somehow. I don't think the soul will reject it. It doesn't seem like it. And I don't know if the soul places any conditions saying, well, you know, you did lie today, or you did take something that wasn't yours, or you did eat that cow today, so I can't take you with me. I don't think that exists. You?
It's an acquired condition. So, you know, we have to practice. And there's ways and means to practice. So, you know, I think old habits are hard to break, but they can be broken. There's no question about it.
I would say, Alex, that Gaston Nissons was one of the first people to probably actually photograph non-visible and visible plasma at the same time. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You know, the problem that he had is he didn't have the knowledge of Mr. Kesh. So, you know, I always, Mr. Kesh was very lucky. You know, he was exposed to an environment in a hospital environment where they had x-rays. And so the simple question is when an x-ray is passing through the body, it can see the bones, but it cannot see anything else. So in other words, using an x-ray, you can't see the blood. So even with a somatoscope, you can't see the blood. You can only see the outline of the blood cell. So still inside the blood, you can't see anything. So the question then becomes, if the x-ray is looking through the body and it can only see the skeleton, which is a physical manifestation, so everything else that it cannot see is literally a plasmatic manifestation, because the x-rays are beyond the range of the visible light. So if we look at the somatoscope and how the somatoscope works beyond the visible light, is it took two light sources, right? And brought them together, and they created an image based on whatever they were reflecting from. So that's how the somatoscope could see. And that technology was deemed illegal because the regular telescopes and the regular microscopes were a single vision. So the somatoscope was a double vision. So, you know, that concept is so totally ridiculous. It's unbelievable. I mean, you have two eyes. So, you know, hello, you know, why do you have two eyes? You know, so the somatoscope had two eyes, so it could see. Well, you know, these people were from Missouri and were seeing is believing, and what they saw, they didn't believe. So, you know what? They weren't from Missouri. They were from some lunatic house, okay? Because the fact of the matter is that that blood cell was there. And so instead of paying attention to the technology and trying to figure out what works and doesn't work, what Nason's found out is that by altering the pH of the blood, he could determine how many somatids they could provide. And what he also discovered was that a healthier person had more somatid activity than an unhealthy person. Now, the one thing that I didn't mention was that this was a live blood analysis. So when you look at the lab analysis, they don't look at the live blood. They look at the dead blood. And what is the dead blood? So the dead blood is actually taken out. The dead blood is taken out of the body. So now it's red. If it were red, wouldn't the x-rays see it? So it's transparent. And since the somatoscope is not looking at the physicality, but is looking at the emanating life force, then it can only see the image the same way that the x-ray sees. So here's what I'm saying. The x-ray can see the skeleton, cannot see the rest of the body. So therefore the rest of the body, as Mr. Cass says, is GANS. So the blood is part of the GANS. So the somatoscope cannot see the physicality. But since the blood is taken out of the body, the blood is red. But the somatoscope is not seeing the physicality. It is seeing the essence of the blood. So it too doesn't see the red color. But what it does see is the outside of the red blood cell. Now, compare that to the body. There's nothing in the red blood cell. The somatoscope can't see anything inside. And the other thing it can't see is that point of transmutation of the somatid. The somatid is a byproduct from the red blood cell. That's a fact. And because of these somatids have a high surface to volume ratio, they have an extremely high negative charge. And when you fill up that area in between the blood cells, they bounce off each other like magnets. And it's constantly in motion. And so what they are is little plasma fields that are bouncing off each other. And there is a pattern. If you look at it long enough, and you don't have to look at it very long, I'm talking a few seconds, you can clearly see, pick one somatid and follow its path. And as it gets near to another one, then it'll bounce off, just like a magnet with an invisible field in between. And then it'll go in the opposite direction and then hit another somatid and bounce off. But there's no physical contact between, they never touch. They never ever touch. They just bounce off each other. They, as if they have a magnetic field around them. But the somatids are visible. That means they're in physicality. The perimeter of the red blood cell is visible. That means it's in physicality. The center of the red blood cell is non-visible. That means it's in GANS. So when we look at the X-ray, the outside of the red blood cell is also not visible. There is no difference. In fact, the whole thing is not visible. But when you look at the body, the skin is visible. Okay, so you have a physical manifestation on the surface. You have a plasmatic manifestation inside. This is the revelation. This is the breakthrough. And that plasmatic inside is gravitational. So it's of a higher energy. And in order to be a higher energy, it has to be at a higher plasma state. It is not physical. Hello. Let me just extend that one more, if I may, please. You look at the volcano and you see the lava that comes out is red hot. Now, you can cook soup on the kitchen stove. And if you overcook it, it may expand and come out of the pot and pour all over the stove, kind of like lava. But on your stove, you have a heat source, that stove element. Where is the heat source in the earth? Where is that heat source there? And so if you dig down, are you hitting the lava? The only time you see that lava is on the surface. And what is it doing at the surface? It's cooling down. So the surface of the planet is a crust, but inside the planet is a plasma. So you see a consistency, the red blood cell, the human body, and the planet. Now saying, what's the sunshine? The sunshine is the sun crust. And that crust is not just irradiation, it is full-blown radiation, not a nuclear radiation, beyond that. Beyond that. And it's life-giving. And so this is a normal process, shall we say, evolution, but it's not so much, it's maturity. We have that capability. So now we know that, if we stop playing kids games, that we can bring peace and harmony to this planet, and we can join the universal community. And as Mark said, it's probably a lot more fun in the universal community than it is in the earthbound community. So what do you think?
And did you know, Alex, that 2 weeks before the Mount St. Helens explosion, that all the rivers around there turned pure white? I would say that's the GANs of the planet.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I went down there not long after that happened. I was out talking to the people there. One of the old gentlemen said, I don't know what's strange, but all the rivers that were on my land coming from that mountain, he said about 2-3 weeks before, they all turned pure white. He said, but it was after that, he said 2 years later, the best crop he ever had. So I would say that's the planet giving up the GANs before the lava comes out to do what? To cleanse the planet. We have to look at the earth a totally different way now when we understand the plasma science. Same as us, same as our blood. They take the blood out of they put it in that vial, but the moment that it's in that vial, it's dead. It's dead.
Yeah.
It's not alive. I've done a lot of live and dry blood testing, and we even to the point where we took drops of blood and then took a sequence of a liquid herb and put that into that and tried to recreate the electricity of the body into the slide to see if it would help the blood. 99% of them didn't do anything. But
Well,
again, how good was the scope? We were only seeing in the physical state. We weren't seeing like Gaston was seeing in the plasma state.
well, exactly. And these people who are doing live blood analysis, they're doing 8,000 magnification. Not 30,000. Well, actually, the pictures that I showed you was of 30,000, but the microscope that he's using now is over 125,000. So another, I multiply that by 4. So,
and his product that he made from that, the 714X, I've used that product and it does work.
Yeah, the product works, but again, it's a physical interpretation.
Exactly.
And this is the thing, we are now at the point where each one of us can use the plasma manifestation, because that is what dictates to the physical manifestation. So as we become more understanding of that, then our approach to looking at, well, let's oh God. Did you ever wonder why the Food and Drug Administration is administering both food and drugs? So they are treating food as a drug. So anything that you consume externally is a physical altering thing, right? So I have never looked at food and drugs as being part of the same family. And so I often question that. But if you say, well, what is the criteria? So the common denominator is that they are external consumed items. But, the thing that it was dismaying was that the quality of the food also mattered. So it wasn't just, what the food did for you. You say, oh, I can eat this food and it's going to make me healthy. Yeah, but is it genetically modified, or does it have pesticide on it, and what are the lingering effects on it? So the genetic modification and the pesticide are also physical altering. So quality, it isn't just any quality; it's good quality or bad quality, right? So the quality matters. So we have to take more and more things into account. But if the people who are assigned to do the job will do the job, not for their own pocketbook, but for the benefit of the community, in the long run, let's go to the extreme. If I am following a practice where my neighbor is diminishing as a result of my actions, at some point my neighbor is going to disappear. Now, that's okay if you can take another neighbor to abuse. But, what happens if that's the last neighbor? Now you have no neighbors. Who are you going to abuse? Well, guess what? You have now been accustomed to abusing people. What's going to happen to you? Now you're going to turn around and, maybe you're going to abuse your family instead. Because the inherent desire to abuse has been ingrained within your psyche. you have conditioned yourself to do that. So this is where the emotional enhancement unit becomes very, very important. You'll be able to reset to your default position, which is to be a good universal functionary on this planet. And believe it or not, that is causing terror in the hearts of some people. And it's palpable. I can feel it. And, you know, as the mercenary said when he got caught, I got paid a lot of money, but there's not enough money to get me out of jail. And there's a physical jail, and there's a mental jail, and there's an emotional jail. And I'll tell you, those are far worse, because there's a balancing that comes up, you know. Over to you, Randy.
Thank you, Alex. I never did get to it, but there's a village in the northern part of Thailand where when the people get to just about the stage of what we call death, their bodies literally disappear into nowhere. I heard about this from all the time I lived there in Thailand, but I never did get a chance to go up there. So I'd sure like to know what's happening in the plasma state in that village, because other villagers, when they feel they're going to die, they go to this village and the bodies are not there. They're gone. So whatever is happening in that village is quite interesting as far as plasma science is concerned. I'm going to try to find out a little bit more about that and get back to you on that.
Very interesting. I know Mr. Kesh said now is the time to understand the transmutation, and it's up to each one of us to find that position. Maybe they are finding that position in that mountain, or consulting with people who can teach them.
Yeah, that's just it. You know, you don't know how to do it, so you just assume that, you know, nobody knows how to do it. But, you know, you have to assume that there are those who do know. And, you know, if the conditions are right, they will share that with you. And if the conditions aren't, then they won't share it with you. But if your soul is aligned properly, then you will come within nearness and proximity of having those conditions. And so that's what these teachings are all about, is to show you how to navigate. And those people who are here want to be here. And those people who are not, hey, guess what? They don't want to be here. So, you know, we all
Maybe they
navigate.
resurrected themselves. As Mr. Kesh said, you have to resurrect yourself. So Randy, they might have disappeared, but at the same time, they might have appeared as another man or a woman.
Absolutely
Same
true.
place.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Because many of those places in northern Thailand, there's no internet. There's none of that stuff. They just simply live from the earth and of the earth. And there's one thing that I did notice when I lived there is when they ate all the traditional foods, they were thin, they lived a very long life. And as soon as they started eating the Western foods that were all there, they all got overweight, fat, diet, you know, all the Western diseases come. So you are what you eat.
Okay, is there someone else who'd like to bring up something else about this teaching today, or?
I would like to suggest something.
Oh,
This is
please.
Misty.
Yes, Misty.
I'm hearing a lot of the word grounding, jail, hatred, and things like that. It builds up. And we're electrical beings, and we don't put our feet on the ground, the earth, and hands in the dirt. And I feel as though that helps to balance something before you try to say go within. I feel as though you have to ground yourself. And if people did that more, I feel that they would be more balanced and there would be a lot less turmoil. But we keep rubber between ourselves and the earth. And our souls are kind of separated, I feel. And so we're always looking for something, but we never really find it. And I found that when I was younger, I did a lot of gardening, and I'd had my son, and I was nursing him. And at one point, I just was nothing, I felt nothing but love. I was very, extremely happy and young enough to feel that. And at one point, I could, let's say, use my two eyes, but eventually my third eye, I would say my soul eye, could start seeing the energies around the trees, the energy give. And I started seeing energies around people, not physically, but plasmatically in my third eye. And so I imagine these teachings will be, and what we will be learning will head towards that, where we will be able to see and feel the intentions and beyond our physical eyes. But just wanted to add that.
Interesting you say earth ground. We were talking about that in one of the Magarev studies there about an off-grid generator. And what it needed for sure was an earth ground, meaning you'd put a pole or stick a wire down into the ground and get that earth ground. And I know Mr. Kesh has often talked about walking on the beach barefooted and connecting with the fields of the planet. And like you said, we keep ourselves insulated from that in so many ways.
Yeah, I've heard about that, like on the grounding, walking around bare feet. Like there's the, I can't remember where it was, maybe South America, where they run and they're bare feet and they can run really fast. It's the momentum and the energy, you're more connected. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Misty, too. So it's taken a couple thousand years for this teaching of Christ to really come forward in an understanding brought by the Kesh Foundation, Mr. Kesh, and so on. Even though some have understood it, and maybe some have understood it and hid it, but for the most part, I don't think they have understood it. But now is the time to understand this transmutation or resurrecting ourselves. I always thought about creating another cycle. I thought I would have to ask the creator himself if I would be good enough to create a new cycle. But now I know that we all can create a new cycle. We just haven't been aware of it. And of course, our soul, whether you're aware of it or not, I think your soul will create some sort of new cycle. It's just sort of, as Alex said, the default. But maybe we can be more involved in that new cycle in so many ways, or at least experience it more when we're in the physicality, so that when we are out of the physicality, we'll have an idea of maybe where we want to go or what we'd like to see. So it's a dimension beyond the known dimensions in so many ways. Although we're doing it all the time, this is the other part of this teaching, that it's us who have denied it, but we're doing it. So let's stop denying it and get more in touch with it, and we can achieve to be able to resurrect yourself. And then what worries do you have if you choose to create another cycle here in the physicality or another cycle somewhere else? And most people go through their entire life never even realizing that that's a possibility, or possible to do it while you are alive here. So we're very fortunate to be touched by this knowledge of the Kesh Foundation. And we have that field strength, I think, to see a little bit of it where the others are just turned away from it at the point in time, although their soul understands it as well. The physicality is just too strong to want to try to accommodate it. Anyone else like to come in here? It's free for all.
Hello, Mark. Good evening or good morning.
Yes, Gallup.
It's Galip here from Holland. First of all, thank you so much, Alex, for this beautiful teaching, and it's been very insightful. I hope I can listen to it again because I missed a part. So I cannot really ask a question that's directly related, but I recently discovered something and I wanted to present it to you if you can maybe give me more insight about it. It's about I added carbonated water to my CO2 system and I got a lot of aminos or something that looks like amino acids. Maybe I can show it to you. If that's okay.
I think it's okay. Alex, are you okay?
Yeah, Mark, do you want to take over the screen?
Sure.
Because I'm going to have to stop sharing, otherwise I'm going to be thrown off here. So
Okay,
Let me know.
let me just move that over here. And Gallup, did you want to share the screen?
I can send it to you.
Okay.
I will send it on Zoom.
Or Telegram might be easier for me. I haven't taken too many things off of the Zoom.
I understand.
I know Alex in the Spanish teaching talked about it was fine to use the mineral water. And there was some questions about amino acids and ganses. But I think he said that there was no problem in using the mineral water.
Yes, because
Carbonated
what I
water.
had, normally it takes a long time for a good amount of aminos to appear. And now I had like more than I ever had in one day. But I'm not sure if it are aminos that I wanted to ask that actually.
Okay, no problem. We have a
Uh,
lot of eyes who've seen aminos before here.
Okay, I can't find you on top to share it.
Okay, try the Zoom and I'll try to pull it out of there. Or perhaps maybe Alex is able to do that.
If you
Let's
can
see.
see it now.
I'm looking. Okay, but
I can see it. I can see it.
where are you seeing it, Diane? In Zoom?
So yeah, on the main screen. I don't, the one that
Okay,
Well, I
go ahead.
did to the thing.
Oh, yes. Okay, we see it now, Gallup.
Okay, great. Well, yeah. So this is it. It's all colorful and I used to get aminos. It does react the same way to my spoon and stuff. So I do think it's aminos. But there was quite a lot, like a lot more than I used to get
it
in
looks
one day.
it looks like amino acids, but I can't say for sure.
Right, and Mr. Kesha said we do need a good supply of amino acid on hand. He was referring to Ukraine and so on, that they have a lot of amino acids, or when he was talking about decontamination. So the more amino acids, probably the better, collecting them. What sort of salt did you use? What percentage?
This is 5% or 4%, and it's Turkish rock salt and Swedish rock salt and Korean salt and different sources of carbonated water as well. I used one Belgium carbonated water. It's naturally carbonated when it comes from the ground.
The pink or the chartreuse is an interesting color there.
Yeah, it's very different colors. I harvested these aminos and I waited for if they would come again and they didn't. So that tells me that they're probably being formed from the minerals that I added. And then I added just a tiny bit of mineral water again and it did form again. I can see if I have a new form. And again, it's formed in 1 day, loads of amino acids.
Can you zoom in so we can take a closer look at the colors? Is that possible?
Of course, of course. Can you see it zoomed in now?
Yes.
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 This is as far as I can zoom in.
That's excellent. And you know what that almost looks like? That almost looks like when you
Nebula.
pour oil into water, how
Yeah,
it separates and forms the colors.
Yeah, like when you drive over water that's on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
I have another one. Kay has asked question. Thank you for the question. It's one cup, one life. I have another. I'm gonna show the other picture.
But you used various salts and various mineral waters. That's what you
Yes.
said? Yes.
Yes. So this is from today. I harvested the GANs or the aminos yesterday, and I added just a tiny bit of mineral water again, and again there's a good amount of what you call aminos formed again. I can show you what it looked like harvested, if you like.
Sure. Well, we'll have to ask one of these civilizations that specialize in amino acids since Mr. Kesh is not here. I think he could make some interesting comments about this.
Open my camera now. Let's see.
Okay, we see your camera.
Oh, you see me. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. You weren't supposed. Let's see. This is what it looks like. And there is a settlement, and it's a lot bluer than CO GANs or my normal GANs. And I can open it.
Are they still floating on the top?
No. They a little bit, but the ones that are floating are more white now, as you can see.
Yes, we can see that.
And when you collect them and you push them together, they become like this. They become blue. I noticed when I was taking it with my spoon. So the colorful aminos, when you push them together while grabbing it or harvesting it, they become blue like this. And when I shake it, when I try to shake it, they are not, they shine. They shine light, or like they reflect light, I should say. Maybe I can open my flashlight. No.
You mean like little diamonds?
Yes. They don't look like GANs. But it's hard to. I cannot open my flashlight to show, but yeah, that's what I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just wanted to provide this. Maybe someone already knows about this because it would be quite useful if we have this method to create a lot of aminos. Or maybe it's a bit weaker aminos. I don't know. But if it's viable, then it's useful, I guess.
I think Dean is here. Maybe he could show these pictures to Herbert perhaps and get back to you on some comments from Herbert. I don't really know for sure how to comment on these. They do look authentic.
Mark, I just wanted to ask about, the metal around that jar that's closing the jar off.
Mhm,
Does that have any effect? Because I remember we were told to take off those
mhm.
metal clasps and use the, the gasket that's present.
Yeah,
Is that?
I don't know if that would cause that. I don't think he made it in that container. He's just storing it in that container.
I mean, I didn't mean that he would make it with it, but that it might affect the quality of what you have. I don't know. I'm just curious if anybody knows.
Would any experts like to come in here?
Please.
But I know in the
So-
universal unit, they're using a lot of amino acids and things, and there's no metal. I know the new chairs he was showing us, there's no metal at all. And I know if one of the ways, if you had a mason jar and you were using the metal cap on it, someone had said to put some plastic in between the cap and the jar. But I don't think that would, but again, I don't know enough to make a proper comment here.
I think those are useful. I will consider them and look up for new. I'm trying to go as pure and as most scientific as possible. I'm just doing my best. So thank you for the tips.
Dean, are you with us? If you could open your mic, perhaps. I was just thinking you could show a couple of these pictures to Herbert. And he's made quite a number of ganses and played with that. I don't know if he's done anything with carbonated water or mixing salts. He possibly has. Dean probably can't come to the mic at the moment. Very
Hi, Mark.
interesting.
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Hi,
Thank you, Dean.
Sorry. Yeah, I've been. Funny enough, I've just been looking at my 5-cup stack system and seeing what amino acids are on there. And some of them have a little, and some of them don't. But I've been experimenting, sort of using different salinities and all sorts of things with them. So at the moment, there's a lot of salt buildup. That's for sure.
What are your thoughts on the aminos he's showing here?
Yeah, they look excellent. That's from what I've seen when I've been present with Herbert and what I've seen. These are the amino acids that you experience within the foundation quite a lot. Yes, most definitely. And when I've produced certain ganses, and you get this spectrum of aminos building up, and when you put them in the environment, you can have some very plasmatic conditions arising, that's for sure. So they're wonderful to use in many, many different ways for lots and lots of applications. Use your thoughts and intentions and the unlimited ability of what you want to use it for. And I'm sure you'll come up with some incredible plasmatic conditions, and then just bring that back into the group and just share what you've done and like you've just done.
Do you think Herbert would like to look at these pictures? The pink ones were with the green was quite, and here we see a little bit of pink. I was wondering if he was using any of that salt with the iron, the Himalayan salt.
I didn't
Okay.
because I was told not to. And
Right.
thank you, Dean, so much for your input. It was great to hear.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you for showing those pictures. They're wonderful. Yeah, they are exactly what you need. And as I said, you will find you'll have many interactions with that material that you've produced there with those amino acids. If you use those amino acids in conjunction with the ganses and in all your applications and whatever your thoughts and intention are, you will definitely have some very major results. That is for sure. That's for sure.
Mm.
So keep experimenting and keep using those ganses and those aminos.
Yeah, there's a blue one there.
Thank
I
you.
haven't seen that before. Very blue down here at the bottom of the picture.
How long did
Yeah,
it take for these aminos to build? Did
One
it take
day.
was it fairly instant?
One day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if it were viable aminos or if it was just something else.
I think, like with with a lot of this technology, if it's done in with the right intention and you have that genuine condition where you are your conscious thoughts are connecting with the GANs that are in the bottom, and then you have the environment with the materials used, you are going to get this this bloom of amino acids that happen, as you said, within a day. I know Mr. Kesh has mentioned many times with lots of different things with this technology, that if it's done in the right way and your intentions are pure, it's almost instant in many applications. So yeah, I think you're obviously in a plasmatic condition yourself, and creating at will. Well done, excellent.
Thank you. I did have a little application for it. It's a bit silly, but I can show it. So I filled this all three. These are the red one. There is the amino of CH3, and this blue one is what you earlier saw. And the white one is the amino of ZNO. And on top, I have 1 cup of 1 live GANs. It's filled, you can't see it. And this is, I call a small pyramid. And I have multiple of these, and I just distribute them around the house or in the parks when I go. Yeah, so this is what I did with aminos thus far.
Yeah, that's good. You need to you don't need to do it. Whatever your intentions are, whatever whatever your thoughts and intentions, and what you're trying to create. As we know, Mr. Kesh and Rick has mentioned this many times, that there are as many star formations and reactors as there are stars in the night sky. So whatever you're creating will have a very unique position, and I'm sure it will create whatever your intended use is. And I'm sure it'll be a beautiful creation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I've just, now that you've gone on to Ganses, I've got a lot of 5-cup stacker systems in a, it's like, it's hard to describe, well, it's not hard to describe. It is a, like a Mandela effect on the floor in my apartment at the moment. And whenever I move them around, I get different conditions and different plasmatic conditions. So sometimes I mixed them and shook them up and found that it had some startling effects within the environment around me. And then I would let it settle, and you would have many different sorts of emotions and things that would come about. And then I would randomly just move them and see what effects it had. And then sometimes I would consciously put an intention in to see what effects I had. And they're in one part of the room. And then the other side have 5-cup stacker systems. And as I said, they're having, at the moment, I've been away, I've just come back. So just before I left, I noticed that they needed retopping up, and I retopped them up before I left. And I've come back, and they've stayed, the amount of liquid of the salt solution is hasn't dispersed as much as they were just before I left. They were they went through conditions where they suddenly the water evaporation was much more intense. So it was like the conditions, the environment, maybe the emotions in that moment were causing a condition that was making the water evaporate, change its composition. Since then, as I said, I topped it up before I went away, and now I've come back, it's stabilized. One thing I have found, at the moment, I've got a lot of salt buildup, buildup. And funny enough, within the last day, someone asked me for some salts, and so I have a large amount of plasmatic salt now, and I mixed some of the salts, cup 1 and cup 2, and I also put in another element of the salts, which was from the 5-cup stacker system of the Solar Man. And I mixed a little bit of this salt together, put some thoughts and intentions into it, and gave this jar of salts away to somebody today, for them to then use with their thoughts and intentions on however they wish to manifest, and however they want to use these salts. So we will see what happens on from there, and hopefully I will get a response back in the meantime to see what how it manifests and how it can be used in many applications, I think, in many different ways. So that's some sort of experiment or something that's in the matter state that can be used shortly. And as I said, if I get that information back, I will gladly share it with you. I don't know if that's helpful to anybody, but maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Yeah, and we've just started to open this knowledge up, hardly scratched the surface of it. So I would imagine, as we know, there's going to be thousands or tens of thousands of new products. There'll be also people will hit on different things with their just randomly experimenting, I would think, as we just saw what Gallup did. So very beautiful. There'll be so many knowledges starting to open up that we didn't even realize were there right in front of us the whole time. Randy, would you like to read, or would you like me to read what you put in the chat about this village?
You can read it, Mark.
Here is the part of the information about the village in Thailand. It is too big an article for chat. There is a village in north of Thailand. Nam is the name that is famous for not having a cemetery. Apparently, nothing distinguishes it from the surrounding villages. Its population is close to 400, and many of them are elderly. About 5 to 8 people a year, it leaves the ranks of the living, and there is never a burial. It is not necessary, for the people who live here disappear 3 to 3.5 hours after their death, and the corpses are absorbed without a trace. The relatives only have time to bury the deceased and arrange a quick farewell. By the time the mourning women show up, mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, the ceremony is pretty much over. We have to hurry because the dead are soon dematerialized. As the relatives surround him, he begins to melt into the ether. After 10 to 15 minutes, it disappears completely. It is physically destroyed. This phenomena occurs exclusively in this village. Phenomenal phenomena. But
I
I'm
will
sure-
I'll find the rest of the article and I'll put it into the chat of the Telegram groups.
Beautiful. Yes, there's so many things we haven't been looked into or have been kept from us, or like you say, there's no TVs or no internet here. But obviously something, as Mr. Kesh has described, these tribes in Africa and some other places, even the United Nations, where they decide whether a boy or a girl later on. And so there's many things that we will probably be discovering, and especially as it relates to this plasma technology. We've just started to scratch a little bit of the surface.
Mark, you're speaking again here. That sort of touches on Mr. Kesh, and we've all, as knowledge seekers, we've all, some of us, I would imagine, have listened to the teachings and saw the teachings from a long time ago when the reactors are spinning, and certain souls that have attained a position where they have given so much, put their physicality like an arm or a hand into the fields, they become transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And the arm, the hand starts to literally be transparent where they've given so much. So it would be interesting for some of you guys to have these reactors and put your physicality into this position to see what and how the reaction would be in the moment. I've also noted that this phenomenon has been with a lot of monks and other things that sort of meditate and reach a position of stillness where their bodies crystallize And I know they don't completely disappear, but their bodies are literally just like crystals, and then they can be just put into a very small jar or something, and it stays in this condition for, you know, just there's just a condition of the body being, as I said, a crystal, effectively. So there's another position that yeah, the conditions and the emotions and the environment and being at one and still creates that space gap that gives you the ability to, or one, the ability, the soul, the ability to transmutation and take another position, whether that is still in the matter state, or whether it's, as you rightly pointed out, where they completely disappear. So yeah, there's many instances.
Yes, I was hearing a story about a monk who basically embalmed himself somehow over the time, and I think they still have his remains, which he did it all himself, if I remember the story correctly.
Yeah. Do you not think that it's the same position as a universal being when you reach a position of with all the reactors and all the units that we have, like even at the exhibition center, when you reach a position of I don't know what the right word is, elevation, enlightenment, that you become transparent, and then zero-time communications and movement without detection. And I'm sure this is part of, as Mr. Keshe has said in the past many times, we move across your countries without you even being able to detect us.
Yeah.
That's obviously, you know, within the realms and the capabilities of the universal condition.
Okay, so it's approaching midnight or just a little after in Europe, and we don't want to keep everybody up too late. Is there anyone else who'd like to please come forward? Yes, Shweta.
Oh, thank you. Randy, my dear Randy, can I say something about the article with you? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, my dear Randy, for the article about the village people that those go there to leave the body, or even the body disappears. In ancient India, there is an Upanishads and Vedas where we see this body or the condition as Maya, the illusion, and that it is understandable by those who are in the default position, as we say, and accordingly the soul is immortal and immortal traveler of space. And here what is my point of view is that when in the Vedas there are explanation about the Ichha Mrityu. Ichha Mrityu means when the person who is in physicality says that this physicality is an illusion for me, I only created this to experience this, like that, and he's kind of understand that he's an immortal soul, and when he wants to die, he leaves the Maya, he leaves the physicality to disappear. He wanted that, then that person is he is in position of when he wants to die, he dies, and the body disappears. It happens in ancient times. They have this ability to understand the default position and the irradiance. Even if we don't want to the sun to be here, we don't need the sun as it is there always. We need the universal radiant love. We can have it, and we have the same experience to detach from this Maya, and it can happen in 32 days, in 2 minutes, in thousands years, as the soul wants. This is connected directly to the soul. The soul understands. Yes, thank you. The soul understands the Maya. Well, we say no, don't go get attached too much. Don't get attached too much, my dear. It will destroy you, maybe. So it is like that, the soul who understands the Maya, the illusion, or creates the illusion around, and he has the ability to understand always, as in the soul level, that this is only an illusion. And then when he wants to leave with an experience, he leaves, and the illusions just go away. And in the sunlight, nothing is there, because he didn't even wanted the sun to be there. He understands the universal creator's love. So he can come in this illusion Maya, and he can go dissolving the Maya. It can be in the moments of in the timeless space. It is in the dimension of timelessness. There is no time. It can be a moment. It can be sometimes a child appears and disappears. Kind of like a woman get pregnant, and in the physicality we said she lost the child in 3 months in her womb, but the soul came and lost in the leave the Maya, and we were not able to see even the child came, but the child came, the soul of the child came. Like that, in in Asia there are very much there were, I mean, I would say there were, but they lost this knowledge, and now maybe in the way of the irradiance, the default position, if they can understand this, what the villagers were doing. They understand, they accept the leaving of the dimension. They came like that, and they leave the dimension like this. And or otherwise there is the painful death in the decay timeline. Suddenly there is a death with a sadness. Suddenly there is a death with a pain. Suddenly this happens, and this when the physicality decays in front of us. But when the soul is ready, he knows when he came that I have came only for this experience, and then go away, and all the illusion I created will vanish with it. So like that, I understand, as Galib has beautifully showed the coming of the all variables he used, and the colors of that coming from that irradiance. The radiance came as understood by our beautiful teacher, my dear Alex. So I understood that the villagers in Thailand is in a way, somehow I connected that even us, all of us, we say death is natural, but no, death is not natural. We accept it like that. We have accepted the thought process that there will be the childhood, there will be a teenager, and you will be young, and you will be growing old, and there will be much pain and suffering. And if you are not suffering and you are not in pain, you haven't learned. But in the arena of the universal creator, you don't have to have in pain and suffering for any magnitude to create, manifest. So like this, I understand in a way. So I wanted to say that, like, if there is, thank you for letting me say. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you so
and
much.
it's just interesting, in the 12/9/2015 private archives, Mr. Kesh poses the same question. Is your physicality, is this planet Earth more or less an illusion, or just an interaction of fields going on? I'd have to listen to it again, but describing something, again, very interesting. Is it just an illusion, an interaction of fields that's going on? Caleb, I'm going to mute you. Thank you. And if you're a private student, you can have access to that. I think it was 12/9/2015, the AM session. Okay, any other interactions or illusions you'd like to bring forward?
Hello, Mark. Hello, everyone. It's Doug here. From,
hey, hello.
Hey, from down under.
I was going to say that. Thank you.
No worries. I've just noticed lately in various media reports that people have realised during this period of lockdown that time disappears. That they're realising that while they were having to work to the clock during this lockdown period, that there is no, the clock and the time becomes irrelevant. And, people are commenting. Physicists are saying, I've read that they're saying maybe time doesn't exist. And people are responding by saying, yeah, well, anybody that's experienced this lockdown, they're not looking at the clock anymore so much. There's no need. It's a different, what's the word? It's just a different way of
Mindset.
living. Say what?
I said mindset. Different mindset.
Yes, Mark. Everyone was chasing the clock. You'll notice in history, one of the first things that during the Middle Ages and so on, they'd put up a giant clock tower in the middle of the town, and everybody would listen to the bell or watch the clock, and that was a way of controlling people to get them to go at the same time to work, and then they maybe have a break at lunchtime or something, and then there was at night they would go home. But this has changed the whole thing. This it's sort of the positive out of this experience we've had recently, that a lot of people are realizing that what the hell were we doing all those years, chasing the clock, looking at the clock, yeah. So I just wanted to say that. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Oh,
And a lot of those office workers that work from home don't want to go back to the office anymore either.
That's right, Randy. They're just saying no. We've got a way now through the modern technology. We can do all these things from home, and we don't have to sit on a train or drive in a traffic jam for hours just to get to the office to do a so-called 8 hours or whatever it is, and then there's another 2 hours, 2 hours at the start and 2 hours at the end just to get to the office and get back home. And it's just a waste of energy. So yeah, there are many positives, I think, coming through, that will never go back to that old way, regardless of what the powers that be might want. People are just saying, no, we don't need this. We don't need that old system. We can do it a different way.
beautiful. Maybe Mr. Kesh would like to make a comment. I'm not sure if he heard any of the previous, what we were discussing about this village in Thailand, or what Shweta had said, or even what Gallup had shown us with the amino acid made with using some carbonated water in combination of salts. Mr. Kesh, are you open to take any questions? I don't want to impose on you. I guess he's not opening his mic, so he just wanted to appear with us. Thank you. So now is the time to understand transmutation, and I thought I'd play again from our friends in Australia. Thank you, Doug. From Lisa in Australia, this video called A New Tomorrow, where all the created things will understand and be able to move between this dimension of energy, which is the universe or the creator, and the dimension of Mitra, which we consider the physicality. And then I'll play the final disclaimer and the meeting will end. Alex, go right ahead.
May I just say thank you for everybody for attending and allow me to make another presentation. I hope you're enjoying these classes and having fun with it. And the objective, of course, is to teach the plasma science in a way that is suitable for everybody. We have to navigate through these fields because, as Doug said, there's no going back. And it's what T-minus 49 days and counting, and the change is going to be breathtaking. So we're all looking forward to the new exciting episode. So hope to see you all next week. Thanks again.
Thank you, Alex. Anyone else like to come in? Selena?
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I wasn't here. My
No problem.
it was open. The Zoom was open. I was doing something else. Sorry about that. What kinds of subject you were talking about?
No, I know you were looking for Mr. Kesh. You said that he could answer some of your questions that you had. And
Yeah.
he's just appeared just a couple minutes ago with
And then?
us. Of course, he's
And-
here as a knowledge seeker, so he reserves the right just to be here as a knowledge seeker, I'm sure. But maybe you'd like to pose a question that you've been holding for him.
Yeah. I will talk to him a few minutes later.
Fine.
Not right now.
Very
Just
well.
carry on. Thank you.
And maybe it's just our soul passing through these fields that we're experiencing all these things through the
Yeah.
fields of this planet, if you'd like to, or perhaps just the soul of this planet and our soul interacting with it. And a lot of this could be an illusion, more or less, even though it's even hard to grasp that understanding. When I'm sitting on a chair and I'm looking at a screen and I'm looking out the window, how could it be an illusion? So many things we're going to discover as our knowledge increases and we get exposed to more different understandings. Yes, Dean.
Mark, may I just quickly just say something?
Of course.
So I have in my hands in this very moment 2 magnets, spherical round magnets that I went to the Mexican Foundation when it had one of its conferences.
Okay.
And I stayed with somebody, a Mexican man, and these magnets were on a store, on a street store.
Sure.
As I walked down the street, and I came across these and I've never seen round magnets that Mr. Kesh has spoken about before, and I have them in my hands right now. And when they're matter state, obviously, but the field you get between them is different when they're in a sphere, when they're round, completely different. And I've never seen. I've tried.
Is
many
this
times
the
to get
ones with
round
no north and no south pole?
Yeah, I mean it's constant. When you actually turn the one magnet, you get the field interaction is completely different. And so I'm holding them in my fingers, and I'm limiting their ability to move and feeling the feels between them. So I can only imagine when they are released, like a sun, a planet, a star, a cell, that how the magnetic and gravitational fields will operate, will function. It's very much like when it was taught a while ago, quite some moments ago, to put some ganses, a little drop of ganses in your palm of your hand. And I did this a long time ago in the foundation. I put a tiny little drop of GANs and in those moments, in that time, I wasn't quite so sure whether I knew about the amino acids, but I'm sure it would have been present. And I put a tiny little drop of each and went outside into nature and closed my hands and let it dry in the palms of my hands. After I did this, I not directly afterwards, but a short period afterwards, I started to have many things operating in my physicality. I could start to feel the fields, very much like the magnets I've just mentioned, and putting my hands together, and it felt like slabs of concrete. It's hard to describe, like not as heavy and dense as concrete, but when I pushed my hands together, it was like trying to push my hands through such dense fields. It was quite incredible. And that feels exactly the same with those magnets when I pushed them together, the field interactions. And the fact that we spoke about the illusion and everything, and go into all the interactions I had within the Foundation's conference, and then walking the streets and coming across these magnets, and having many interactions with them over the years. I've enjoyed their company. The souls of these magnets that are present and showing me and delivering messages to me that I can then partly share with you now, so you can understand or experience some of the fields just by speaking about it. So these interactions, as I said, the magnets that Mr. Kesh speaks about, and the magnets in the GANs, in the amino acids, when the formations happen on the top of the GANs, and that deep connection with the planet Earth and ourselves, and then when we go outside of this sphere and take away the amino acids of the Earth, but the magnetical gravitational field influences of the conditions of the universe, it's in the matter state condition I'm speaking about now, because I'm feeling it physically with my hands. My question would be, I suppose, to Mr. Kesh at some point if he would ever like to answer this, is how would that feel in a position of non-physicality? How would those fields interact with the soul? Is it a position where the soul is drawn magnetically to a position, or is there, because you have non-physicality, would you even experience this in that sort of way whatsoever? It's an interesting thought that has crossed my matter state condition of my brain. Anyway, thanks, Mark. Thank you for listening.
I thought you were going to tell us how you gave one of the magnets to someone in Mexico and you kept the other one, and now you're communicating back and forth. I know there was a teaching where Mr. Kesh said you could break a magnet in half and put one in your child's pocket and one in your pocket, and you would have this zero-time communication. Now, maybe, again, that's just the matter state confirming to you in a way and believing in that. That is your ability, because it is, and the magnets are just sort of like a prop in a way.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, you say breaking a magnet in half. So when you have a child and say the father or the mother, isn't that the same thing? Isn't that exactly breaking in half a magnet and having that connection?
Yeah,
and
it sounds pretty close to it. Yes.
Yeah. For me, it would be the same interaction. We're talking in a different condition, but it's exactly the same explanation from my thoughts and intentions. Anyway,
I think we have a lot to learn.
Yeah,
but we do know someone who does have that knowledge, and it's residing within all of us. As we know, nothing is hidden from the soul of the man.
No.
Yes. He is not here right now.
No, he just checked in for a moment and
Yeah.
then he departed. So
Okay, it's okay. Friday night I saw him in my dream.
oh, good. Yes.
Maybe I solved my problem.
Oh, good. Yeah, he said we need to get closer or absorb from his soul. He was talking in the last workshop, I think,
Yeah.
that we could absorb.
Thank you for
Thank you.
asking.
Okay, I'm going to play this New Tomorrow from Lisa. Thanks to everyone in Australia, Jim and Lisa and Doug and all the rest that I can't name at the moment. And again, it's about this understanding about this new position that the Creator is working on in the universe. it's closer than anyone can imagine, that will all the created things will be able to move between these two dimensions of energy and physicality. And this is what we're talking about with the transmutation. So many things happening. We have a lot to learn and understand and comprehend. I want to thank everyone for joining today, contributing, being here on the soul level. Very powerful indeed. So thank you all. Alex, again, we appreciate you and the knowledge you share. So I'll play that, then the final disclaimer, and the meeting will end. But it's beautiful in a way. As he said, this is a gift from the Creator, that the whole creation will be able to do this transmutation between the energy state and the matter state.